This story took place in 2010 at Halloween when I was just 11 years old. I will do a brief backstory to lead what would eventually led up to this. From between age 5 to 10, I always been in company with my parents for trick or treat, which I always loved. After all, even when I was just a kid, I loved Halloween, especially with all these decorations and especially trick or treat. But now I was 11 years old. I had begged my parents to let me go trick or treat by myself, but they were not unlucky enough to do that. But then I said, well, I can go with some of my best friends. And even though they were a little bit hesitating to do so, but at least then my dad told me, always be aware of my surrounding areas, my surroundings, and always be on high alert of anything mysteriously or strange. If anything would happen, always trying to find another adult, just in case. All of this was actually my dad's annual strange danger warnings. Ever since they was like when I was 6 years old, my parents had told me all about this. And I remember. And thanks to this to my parents, very high alert and all these strange danger warnings when I was just a kid, which could have been for at least one of the indirect things that actually saved my life this day. And what I'm meaning about that, I will let after that. But after my parents actually allowed me to go for Halloween trick or treat this year, I decided to go with my best friends Michael, Jake, and Adam. We decided to go on along this, at least on a few neighborhoods that we knew that had a lot of candy and, of course, a lot of um, amazing decorations for Halloween. I had to decide to go as Batman this year. After all, Batman was one of my top favorite superheroes back when I was a kid. Jake told me that he was going as a pirate, and Adam was going as Spider Man. On Halloween itself, we were really excited. Even a couple of days before, we had decided from which the neighborhoods we were going to hit at most first. But some of them actually were cheering out on big chocolate bars was something that we really were excited about. But on actual Halloween, we all were meeting at my house around 6 p.m. Of course, my mom still had offered her to go with us. But I told her that I was old enough to go with my friends, and if something would happen, I will always make sure to tell someone if it's another adult or run as fast as someone else's house to ask for help. But at least my dad told me to be careful. Because he once again told me and my friends that this time of the year there's a lot of strange people, and I told my dad I will be fine, and I will always be aware that when something happened. And even though my parents was still unluckily would let me go, but they did so. So for next several minutes on walking on the streets, me and Jake, Adam, we were just talking about which neighborhood we were going to start first with. I mean, we were both, all of us, we just 11 years old, and we were super excited. But we were always being aware of our surroundings. Sure, we did notice of other parents with their kids in the neighborhood, but for next several hours, at least from 6 to almost 7:30, we had hit up several houses and got a lot of goodies, all of this classical smoke away and all kinds of stuff. But we were only one of the last neighborhoods around 8, close to almost 8 p.m. We had noticed that there were less and less trick or treaters out for even on that, and there were a lot of houses now turning off the lights, and that means as a sign of we weren't handing out any more candy. But Jake and Adam, who still didn't want to just stop doing it yet, they said, let's try a more couple of houses just before heading back to my house. Since this Halloween was on an actual Friday, and my parents actually had allowed Jake and Adam to have a sleepover this weekend. And it was also something that we all had looked forward to. But as we had followed another neighborhood that we knew that had handing out very good candy and big size bar candy bars. But of course, when we were on the street, we noticed there were no other trick or treaters, and there were a lot of houses that was still dark. But it was the couple that actually still had a porch light on, and we went up and trick or treat. And of course, there were a few people that actually gave us all the candy, but not all the houses didn't open the doors, but they had this big bowl outside with chunks of candy. Some of them were all complete empty, some were half full, some were still full enough. So we picked up that and we decided it was time to head back home. Well, after the last house, we all decided it was time for us to go back to my house. But as we were just walking, we just laughing and talking about this Halloween was a great big step for us to proven that we were mature enough. But as we were walking along the street, we were only maybe three neighborhood blocks away from my house when Adam stopped, and we didn't notice until like a couple of minutes after when we both stopped and said, "Adam, is something wrong? Come on, we were going home." But Adam stood still and said, and with almost a whisper, "Guys, we are being followed. Like, come on, there's no one else on the street. I mean, there's no other trick or treaters, and no one is even out. Yeah, but the van behind us has been following us." And Jake then turned around, looked, and sure enough, in a distance away from us, maybe as almost a half a block away, there was this red van just parked up on the sidewalk, and said, "Well, that van had been probably staying there the whole time." But Adam shook his head and said, "No, that van had actually been following us since from the last house we worked to." And then I realized Adam was right, because when we were at the last house, I did notice there were actually a red van, not only from distance, but I didn't pay much attention because I thought maybe that van belonged to the house I was standing in front. So I said, "Adam, we probably just imagine it." But Adam was fairly strong belief that it was being followed. But I told Adam, "Well, we only 3 blocks away from my house. So if we go fast, we will probably get there faster than before this car hit find us." But even Adam was unluckily didn't want to go, but he agreed. So we started walking and started laughing, but we didn't notice that Adam, from time to time, looked from his shoulders only for like a brief second to see if this van was actually following us. At first, it didn't seem that it was even doing that. But we were at the next intersection. Suddenly, Adam pointed whispered and said, "Guys, the van is actually following us." So Jake turned around and saw, and he literally confirmed he saw that the headlights was on, and it was the same van as we saw earlier. Even now, I was getting a bit worried. But I thought maybe this van was driving on the same road because this was just on one of those normal neighborhood blocks. But as we were only kept walking across the intersection, we went to the next block, and this time Jake turned around slowly and noticed the van was still following us slowly, with its headlights on. But Jake said, "I now believe Hannah is right. The van is following us." But as we were almost just 1 block away, suddenly the van speed up and was following us in the same speed, and it stopped. And the window opened from the passenger and the driver's side, and there was an older man. I will guess maybe in his mid 30s, a scruffy bear, and he was just smiling and said, "Hey kids, you want some any extra candy? I have a lot of it in my bag." But as I was being taught about strange danger already as a young kid, I already knew this was a classical tactic for people to kidnap you. But I said, "No thanks, we have a lot of candy already, and we don't have enough room for in our bags." "Ah, that's no worry," said the man. "I can give you some extra. I can give you some extra bags, and I can give you a lift home if you want to." That was another red flag. But Jake, who was a little bit, has not even been taught by the strange danger warnings by his parents, unluckily though. He said, "How much candy do you even have, though?" Oh, yeah, I played it for last year until like Christmas this year. That made Jake smile and said, "Well, yeah." But Adam was really hesitating to believe in his story, and he said, "Jake, we have enough, and if we have more, we can always ask our parents to buy more." Even though Jake was a bit sad and said, "Yeah, I agreed. Sorry, but no, we don't want any candy." But all right, but I can give you a lift home. But Adam said no, and come on, it's probably not that far, anyways. I mean, I understand your feet are hurt after this hours of walking around, right? And the man was right. We had been walking around for a few hours, and our feet was hurting, but it was not like we were even going to accept his offer. But as Adam was about to say, but I said strongly, firmly, "No, sir, we don't want any lift home. We are not that far from my home." But the man's smile didn't fade away. His smile said, "Come on, it isn't that far. I mean, it take what, a couple of minutes? I mean, this is probably something you can do for a little friendly neighbor." A friendly neighbor, I thought? I had never seen this guy before. But I told the man, once again, "No, sir, we don't need any of your candy. We have our own, and we don't need any left home. So, thanks, but no thanks. Just please leave us alone. We don't want anything from you." As I told Jake and Adam, "Just follow me," and we were going home. As we were just walking maybe as 20 feet away, we heard the car still driving following us. But just as we were leaving, I did notice the man's smile faded away and went to almost an angry look. But as then, the car were outside once again, but this time the man didn't say anything. But suddenly, the side door that was facing me, Jake, and Adam slid open, and another man almost grabbed Adam, but he managed to grab out of his grasp, and Jake and Adam took off. But in a few seconds, that all happened like it felt almost like an eternity. But then that man managed to grab me and was about to pull me in, but suddenly an older man from the house we were in front of actually heard this commotion and opened the door. "Hey, what's going on out there?" The man in the van, let me go and pushed me out of the ground and slammed the door, and the other guy took off, spinning off the way. Adam and Jake had already run all the way home to my house. I was sitting there on the ground, dumbfounded, just shocked what just happened. The older man walked up to me and asked if I was okay and what just happened. But I was too scared to even do anything. But as the man walked up to me and asked if I was okay, I started crying. I was bawling my eyes out. I was crying and crying. I was just so scared that I almost realized I was almost kidnapped. But as they were sitting there, suddenly, after a few minutes, my dad came up in his car, and he assuming the man that was next to me was the one who hurt me. But my friends, who was also in the car, told him no, that man was not one of the van, and the man confirmed that because he lived in the house behind us, and told my dad what happened. Or at least from his side of view, what he just noticed what happened. My dad saw me was crying, and he tried to ask me once again. But as we were sitting there, a police car showed up. It turns out my parents called for police shortly after my dad left the house, and me, Jake, and Adam, we gave the police officer all the best description about this guy and the driver, and as best as I could about this other guy in the open door. But they asked for what color this, how long do we have noticed this? Well, I said as long as maybe for past 20 minutes or so. And they asked for the typical description of the van, like I said, red, which both Jake and Anna confirmed, but none of them had even noticed the license plate. But luckily, though, I actually had a good memory, and I did tell them, the police officer, exactly the license plate numbers, and he wrote it down and said that he will give us a call by the next day if we had any further update. After that, the man who managed to save me, he actually said that he was sorry, but he was so glad that I was okay, and he even gave me a few extra chocolate bars to me and my friends after this horrifying, terrifying night. And we thanked him. And we didn't hear anything from the police by the next day, but it took about almost 3 days when we finally heard from the officer telling us they actually found the man and his accomplice. Turns out they were locals, and they were actually trying to kidnap me or my friends to have who knows what they were trying to do. And from what I understand, from what I was told, those guys would end up in jail for at least almost 30 years each. And it turns out also the older man who saved us was a war veteran. He had been in a war and he was really much ready to beat these guys up as if he could. My parents actually thanked him. And despite all that horrifying night I went through with my friends, we didn't stop trick or treat at all. But we continued until we were at least 14, but then we stopped. But not all the only other good thing that came out of this. That old man who by any chance to save me, he actually became a family friend. And his name was Bob. Bob was an old friend to the family until he passed away a couple of years ago. But he was a very good man. I saw him like an uncle. And once it is again, Bob, rest in peace, and once again, thank you for what help. You actually saved my life this day and my friends. And those guys in jail, who's still probably still there to this day, stay away from any children like that on Halloween. Thank you. This happened during the Halloween 2014 when I was just 14 years old. I will give you a little bit brief backstory on this one. For the past few years, my parents had taken my youngest sister, Laura, and her two friends for Halloween for trick or treat. But this year, were unable to do so, and since I was too old for trick or treat myself and didn't have any other plans, so they had asked me if I would do any trick or treat with them. Well, there's four of them around since they were too young to go themselves, and since I didn't even have any other particular plans for that day, rather than just be at home and watch some horror movies by myself, so yeah, why I said I will do that. But Laura said that she would give me over some of her candy in return since I was helping them. But I told her not to be doing that since she didn't have to give some of her own candy since she deserved it. But she was still hesitating to even give me some of her candy, at least a few of them. And okay, then I said, okay, Laura, at least that I can go with. So on Halloween, Laura and her two best friends, Sarah and Olivia, were getting ready for going out to trick or treat around 5 p.m. They were really actually going to dress as different characters of their favorite. Laura was going as Cinderella, while Sarah as Mulan, and Olivia was going as a fairy. My parents actually told me to be always be aware of since if something would be off, like strange people or anyone promised them any free candy, but not from the houses. And since my parents had told me about strange dangers when I was in Laura's age, so I promised them to have a watchful eye on them. So we left the house at around 5 p.m., and we did notice there were already a lot of trick or treaters with their parents or themselves on the street, but since we didn't have any plans of what to go start with, so we started in our own neighborhood first. And we did so, and Laura, Sarah, and Olivia had always good comments about their dresses, and I was smiling and asked if I was their brother. But I said, at least no, since Cinderella is my sister, two others are her friends. I told them. And they actually were still getting a lot of good comments about their costumes. But as the night was getting more later and on, we were walked around in at least a different neighborhoods. They actually got a lot of candy, and I even brought and used one extra big bag just in case if it would just get too much. And sure enough, luckily I thought about that since Laura, Sarah, and Olivia did get a lot, so they hand over me and poured some of the candy in my bag, just in case if they would get too much. But as we had been around almost after 2 hours, around 7 p.m., I started to notice there was this tall figure of an older guy. I won't even say exactly how old, but assuming he was around maybe in my age or maybe in his 20s. I couldn't be exactly sure because he was wearing this Malcolm Myers costume. But since Malcolm Myers was actually one of my top favorite horror characters from the movies, so I actually thought maybe this guy really liked the Malcolm Myers and that he'd probably just be out somewhere with someone, with some of his kids or maybe his younger siblings. But as we continue, I didn't put much attention to this Malcolm Myers character. But as we would just continue walking, Laura did say something like, "That guy is following us?" I turned around and noticed that this Malcolm Myers actually were following us, but not as any right behind us. He was not, maybe as almost a half a block away from us. I told Laura and her friends that don't have to be worried. This guy is probably just walking in the same direction to where we are going, or at least part of the way. So they smiled and just continued to walking around the houses, wrapped the out the houses, and get some more candy. It happened that they also run into some of their friends and have a small brief talk before they continued to walk around for more candy. But as the time went on, I forgot about this Michael Myers. But as this night was going on, we managed to get hit on a few more neighborhoods. But and as the rotated clock was around, I noticed my watch said 7:30 p.m. And I did notice there were getting less and less other trick-or-treaters on the street, and a few houses already had turned off their porch lights, meaning they were not going and handing out more candy. And I told Laura and her friends that we were getting more few houses, and then we turn around and get back home. Even though Laura was really hesitant, was really started to be feeling betrayed or something like that, she said like, "No, please, not in half an hour." And her friends tried to be good along with it, so I was like, okay, fine. But it's if there are no more houses getting handing out more candy, there's nothing we can do. All around them, they just turn back home and have the candy there. They agreed. So for the next half an hour, we just continue walking around for to similar houses. But as we continue for that half an hour, I noticed that more and more houses turned off their porch lights. Some of them were still on, but there were just a couple of them. But as we were on a few last houses on that neighborhood, it was almost like 8 p.m. I noticed there were no other people on the streets after the last house, but then, as we were about to turn around, Sarah noticed something and told me by touching my arm and said, and pointing it by the end of the street, this Michael Myers character was standing by someone's bushes and looking at us. And now I was getting a little bit hesitating to even to walk the same way. So I told them to just along with me to cross the other side of the other sidewalk and just walking and always been and and they had to be walking on my right side. And I told them if this character would do something, run as fast as you can back to Laura's house or to get someone else home, banging on the door trying to help. And they were really getting scared when I said that, but I said, just as a safety precaution. Even this guy is probably not going to do anything. He's just maybe trying to scare you. After all, it's Halloween, and people do this. And they actually agreed to do that. But as we walking on the sidewalk, we walked by this place, and the Michael Myers now had moved and was standing behind a tree and looking at us. I just nodded and said, "Scary costume, dude," and kept walking. But this guy didn't say anything like thanks or waved at us or anything or complimented us. This guy was still standing by the tree, but as we had just walked almost 1 block, Olivia, who was just falling behind, noticed and started screaming. I quickly turned around and noticed this Malcolm Myers freaking guy was still grabbing Olivia's arm and almost pulling her, almost like, and I could swear I could hear him say, "You coming with me? You belong to me!" He screamed. And I was like, "Hands off her, dude!" And I ran up to this guy. Even I probably was way tall, shorter than him, but I couldn't even let this guy just grab my sister's best friend and just do anything but to harm her. But this guy was not even letting her go because he was like pulling her, and people that actually had started getting out from their homes and just looking. I screamed, "Call 911 immediately! This guy tried to kidnap her!" And some people actually ran into their houses and did that. But this guy was not even hesitating to even, like, nothing has bothered him. So I ran up to his guy, and as he was just in front of just only a few inches, I punched the guy right in his face. But it's somehow in the less looser grip of Olivia. But the guy stood there and not even flinching. From there, like, it felt an eternity, but it was only like a few seconds when the guy said, "You stopped me from taking my girl." This guy was obviously high on something, or drunk, or maybe on both. I won't even know for sure. But this guy was still demanding to let me to take her with him. But it was not happening. And I told that guy. And he was getting more frustrated, even more angrier. The guy started to getting more angry and angrier and started pushing me with both hands on my chest and said, "You give me her now. You don't stop me this." But I told him, "That's not happening. You're not taking her. She doesn't belong to you." But then he said, "Oh, then if I don't have her, I will have her." And he pointing at Cinderella, my sister. That flipped me off. "That is my sister, dude. You don't ever touch her." And I then yelled at Laura, Sarah, and Olivia to run to the next one of those houses with still some people out there, and even looked at them because I didn't want to have them to punch me in the back or anything. And they didn't hesitate. They didn't say anything. Just took off. But as I was doing this, the man was trying to run after them, but I just did something I probably felt proud of. I literally tripped the guy with just putting my foot from the front of him, and he fell right hard with his face right down on the concrete, on the asphalt on the ground, like punch. And he got up almost like immediate, only a few seconds later. And it's like, this guy must be on something, but this is normally what I knocked out a person normally. But this time, he was even more angry. And as and I'm not kidding, he pulled out a knife, not a small pocket knife, but it's like a big freaking kitchen knife, and a real authentic kitchen knife. And he pointing at me, and he said, "If I can have any of those, you won't have them either." And then he stabbed me twice in my stomach. And my sister saw this from someone's porch and screamed. But I was on the my body was pumping adrenaline, so much adrenaline. I didn't feel the punch or even stabbing or even anything. But I was so angry that it made me to that anger must have numbed the pain. I then punched the guy two more times in his face, but he didn't stop on that. And then he stabbed me at least two more times in the stomach. But this time I kind of felt the stomach pain, but I didn't hesitate. But then suddenly, luckily, two police cars showed up. But this guy not heard that, but he didn't bother, even care for some reason. But the police officers dropped the knife. But the guy just even just turned around and said, "He took my girl!" Screaming at the top of his lungs. But the police knew exactly what had been happening. So they told him, "Drop the knife or we'll tase you." But the guy didn't even hesitate. It just run up towards the officers with the knife in the air. But it tased him. And that somehow managed to grab him on the floor, below the ground, and they hung out him. After seeing this, I started feeling calming down, and But then the police officers noticed my stabbing wounds, and then I must have passed out because my adrenaline had just faded it quickly. And the next I woke up in the hospital, I was like, my parents were standing around, sitting beside my side, and my sister and her friends and her parents. Turns out I was just only passed out for at least a couple of hours, but this was the next day. And after that, the police officers came by and said I actually was a hero. This guy had been terrifying other people around the front street for during that day. Even earlier, even during the day when he walked around as Michael Myers screaming, "Someone had taken his girl!" But turns out this guy was actually high on meth and even drunk. He was so drunk and so high on meth, he couldn't even notice what he was doing was right or wrong. But luckily though, he was put in jail for at least a number of years, at least from what I heard. But they told me that this was something that he did because apparently this guy had been doing this for a number of years before. And this time he was not getting out for a very long time. Laura's and Olivia's, Sarah's and Olivia's parents told me I was a true hero, and they thanked me for saving their daughters. And they could not even imagine that had been like they actually had been being given a call telling that their daughters was gone forever. This nightmare was very terrifying. Even my own parents told me I was a great hero to just stopping this guy from taking Olivia, Sarah, or even my own sister Laura. I was really hesitating to believe that my sister and her friends would not be wanting to go out the next Halloween for trick or treat, but they actually wanted to do. But this time they begged my parents to let me go because I was a true knight. They actually trusted me. And this time, I decided to bring at least one other friend of mine who was very strong and protective. And of course, nothing happened that year. But to that guy who nearly could have ruined my life, completely could kill me, and could have been terrified, have been traumatized my sister and her friends from ever wanting to do anything but Halloween or trick or treat, that guy really should not be released ever again on the streets. But to this guy, for the love of God, hope that we never see you again. If you do, I will not hesitate to put you on the ground, as you did to me. And for my sister and her friends now, they are have moved on from the event. They are already old enough to even do trick or treat anymore, but they are still very grateful that I was there to save them. For that, I'm very grateful that he is safe. This particular Halloween happened during the 2016 clown epidemic that happened around the world. And this particular Halloween, me and my three best friends, Marco, Robin, and Lauren, are decided to go out for Halloween trick or treat. My parents and their parents actually allowed us to do that for once for the first time. And we were so super excited. But even for a couple of weeks before Halloween itself actually happened, we have been told a lot of stories from other classmates and other world from any other people, even from the news, about this strange clown sightings across the United States. We weren't really much not even worried about it because we lived in a small, medium-sized city, and we weren't that any so far no clown sightings in our town alone. But my parents was not very much at first, not even was not even keen to allow us to go, especially myself. But after that, I managed to convince my parents that we were at least four 11-year-old kids, and we were not going to be in such many different neighborhoods. We were only going to those places that we know of, and we promised if something would have been happening, we would always run and get help from anyone. So on the Halloween itself, I was going as a cowboy, Marco as Michael Myers, Robin as the Wonder Woman, and Lauren as Supergirl. We were all so super excited, and we actually met by my house around 4 p.m. We decided to start from my house and from my neighborhood and walk around different ones. So for the next several hours, I would say probably the next 3 hours, we had been walking around different neighborhoods. We actually encountered a lot of our friends of school, and we were actually very excited to be on our own. But as it was getting around, I was assuming it at least around 7:30 ish p.m. I and my friends had actually noticed there were less people now out on the street, and a couple of houses had only turned off the lights. And we all agreed that we will take more a couple of houses before going back home to my place. And I was just really excited to get home, and not only that, but also my feet was hurting a lot. And not, I was not the only one. After all, we had been walking around for at least a few hours, and we were just tired enough. And after we had gone to the last two houses, we noticed there were no more houses that have any lights on, and since it was almost like close to almost 7:45 p.m., we decided it was time to head back home. But when we were just maybe half away from my house, Lauren whispered something like, "There is someone following us." Both Robin and Marco just laughed and said that she was just pranking us. But I know for sure because Lauren, she was not the type of person that just pranking them. But then they were agreed. They were having right off because a lot of people do prank on Halloween. So I assuming it was just that she was pranking us. But as we were just walking, suddenly the silence stopped with someone laughing. And first we assumed it was maybe Lauren or Robin laughing about something. But the laugh wasn't even right behind us because me and Marco, we were walking behind in front of the girls. It was, so it wasn't even them. The laughter, the laughter didn't match any of them. And so we turned around, and sure enough, in a far distance, we saw this figure. It looks like a clown. We thought maybe it was just some a random teenager pretending to be a clown to scare someone, or maybe someone was on their way home from a party or something. But we didn't pay much attention. We just told each other that was just probably someone on his way home. So we turned around and continued walking. And suddenly the laughter stopped, and we didn't pay much attention. But after like maybe it's 5 minutes or so, we heard this laughter again. But this time a bit closer. He turned around and saw this figure or this clown has been following us. And I was not worried or getting scared, but I could notice that Robin and Lauren, they were getting a bit scared. But Marco told them not to be worried. If something would happen, he would take care of this person. Even though I know he wouldn't do that. After all, he was even that strong enough. But as we would just continue walking by ourselves on the street, this laughing clown continued to laughing behind us. But the sound was very sort of scared most of us. But not me at first, but Marco told me that the clown was getting closer and closer. He wasn't running or speed walking. It was just that it was kind of like speed walking, but we couldn't actually hear it of anything. But suddenly it went silent, like completely silent. The only we can hear was the trees moving and about the wind. So Lauren, she still scared. She quickly turned around, and the next second we heard was terrifying scream from Lauren. We all turned around and saw this clown waving to us. But in his hand was a butcher knife. And I'm not kidding. It wasn't like those fake prop knives. This was a really authentic knife. A butcher's knife. We were all so terrified. And this scanned this clown by suddenly maniacally laughing. And we were just staring at this clown. But then, as you see in 1 second, he took off running, not away from us, but towards us, screaming, laughing like a maniac, waving the knife in the air, back and forward, screaming, laughing. We were so scared. At first few seconds, we were just no idea what we should do. But Marco then broke the silence like, let's go! And we all took off. But this clown just continued laughing and laughing and screaming. And he said, I'm not gonna kill you! I'm gonna kill you! Almost like that, screaming and laughing, I'm gonna kill you! Those words and the screaming and laughing affect us really good. And we were the first to believe that it was just some sort of some at first a prank, and this guy would just suddenly stop and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is just a prank," and I would just apologize. But it was nothing like it. This clown continued the same, repeating the same thing, screaming, laughing, and said, "I'm gonna kill you! I'm gonna kill you!" And we were so scared, and we were running and running, but we all realized we had taken off in a different direction, way further away from my house. And as there wasn't like until only a few minutes we were realized we were getting away from my house, not even closer to it. There was Lauren who realized we were getting lost. What are you gonna do? Lauren was almost screaming, crying, and even Robin was the same thing. Mark was terrified. He was so scared that he has no answer to do. He just stood there shaking. We had managed to find some temporary shelter or some people right behind a wall, and we could still hear this guy laughing, screaming, but he was not getting closer. And we heard that he was close by, but we didn't even dare to move. But then he said, "I'm gonna find you," and they started laughing and laughing again, and he said, "No, gonna find you. And no one will find you ever again," laughing as like a maniac. And even though I just want to see how close he were, but Marco and Robin told me not to because it was a risk that he could see us. But I did it, and I should not have because as I was looking just closely behind the wall, the guy just turned around and was about to walk when he noticed me and said, "I found you," and he started laughing. And we saw, or at least I saw him running it towards us, our direction. I told him, "We should leave!" Screaming, and we took off. Another different direction this time. But we weren't even not sure where we were even going. But I noticed some place that we could run to. Because I sort of immediately recognized the area where we were. I immediately recognized the area. We were even not that far from my neighborhood. I told them, "Just follow me. I know where we're going." I screamed to them. And they just nodded and followed me, and even though we could still hear this guy behind us, I managed to run all the way but I told them, "There, we hide it behind some very big bushes." And I told them to get down and be quiet. Not even scream or he was doing anything, I told them, by a whisper. As we behind the bushes, and just only a brief second later, we actually saw this guy coming around from the corner and looking in both directions while screaming, "I'm gonna find you! You were so dead!" He screamed, and Maniac laughed behind it. He started running almost, he was just running in from first one direction. And he first thought, "Oh, finally, he really lost this guy." But only like a moments later, he came running back the same direction. And then he kept running another one. And then he came back another one in only a few minutes. It's like he was almost, it feels like a Sonic character. He was like speed running into different directions. But after he was running on both directions, he stopped middle of the road and started screaming about the top of his lungs. And he was frustrated he couldn't find his playmates, as he said while screaming. We were now terrified beyond words. Terrified more than anything. I mean, I can be watching clowns movies like the old Pennywise miniseries that I heard about, but this was really terrifying. But luckily though, As this clown was screaming, I whispered to them that we had to be crouched down and follow me, and this we were hiding a small patch of woods. And I said my house was just across the other side. If we were silent enough, he wouldn't even see or hear us. And they all nodded without saying a single word. And we did. We managed to at least be halfway through when we heard it scream, I see you! And start screaming and start running towards us. And for even to this day, I have no idea how they even able to find us because this patch of woods was so dense, it was dark. There was not even street lights and even in both sides. But I have still to this day, I have no freaking idea how he even found us. But I managed to assail them, tell our friends to run as fast as they could, and we managed to get to my house from the backyard and get inside. The back door was unlocked, but as we were in, I was hoping my parents was home so they could see this guy and maybe call the police. But when we would even get there, the house was silent. I was getting worried. Maybe my parents were just asleep or something. But the time wasn't even close to 9 p.m. And they don't even usually go to bed around like 12 a.m. in the morning at midnight. I started calling out for both my parents, but no answer. I screamed again, a little bit louder, but still no answer. And then Lauren said, Daniel, you should look at this. And she was actually still in the kitchen and looked on the fridge and on the table. There was a note from my mom saying, Daniel, if you get home a little bit earlier, me and your dad actually went to a friend of ours across on the other streets away from us for our home for a party. So we will be home around midnight. So we had to be leaving you this note. I was now freaked out because I would have hoped my parents would be home, and if this guy would have found my house, I was so freaked out. But Marco then locked the door behind him as he's the last one in, and we just stood there silent in the kitchen, in the dark. We had no idea what we was going to do. But then we heard the laughing. This is the laughing at the maniac. And we were so terrified. But since the beat was dark, we managed to get in the living room, and I peeked out from behind the window and I saw this maniac on my street. And he was looking back at the different houses. But somehow he felt like I was looking at him, and he looked at my own house. But it was dark, and he couldn't even see me. So I told my friends, get upstairs to my room quietly, and they did. As I was about to do it, I saw this freaking clown walking around the street up to my house. And luckily though the door was locked, and as I was just quietly up on the street on the stairs, I heard this maniac banging, 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 not by his bare hands and supposedly I believe that's also with his butcher knife. I was freaked out, and I took off fast up the stairs, and that made him realize we were in the house. And he said, I found you. I'm gonna find you in there. Kill you like a small little piggies. He was screaming and laughing. It's like he was not right in his mind. But what he realized, as Marco said, we should call the police. But there was a slight problem. I didn't even have a cell phone at the time, and my parents didn't have any with them either. And even if I did have the phone, but the phone was in the kitchen, and the guy was downstairs, and I was like, there's no way I could go down there. No one even should. But the guy continued, and then suddenly we heard a smashing sound. He had smashed one of the windows, and now he was probably getting inside. But then I realized my bedroom door didn't even have a lock on it. And I was realized that if he find us, he would easily get in my room. I told my friends we should go to my parents' room because that was the only room that had a lock except for the bathroom door. So my parents' bedroom was not even that far. We managed to sneak in to my parents, and then Marco locked the door behind him. And I told the girls hide beneath my under my parents' bed, and Marco and I tried to do anything to block the door just in case something would happen. At the surfer silent, we sat there, listened. We could only hear our beating hearts in our own ears. But then we heard this maniac laughing. He was now actually inside my own house. As I told my friend in a whisper, just stay quiet. He cannot hear us if he knows that we are here. But he starts screaming, I know you up there. Screaming and laughing just like a maniac. We could hear him smashing pieces down there. We assumed there was some picture frames or anything. But But then we heard this guy walking up the stairs, and we were started getting scared. I can actually hear Lauren and Robin crying, but I told them to be quiet as possible they could, because if this guy heard them, he realized that we are in this room all immediately. And he bashed in my bedroom door and looked around, screaming, I'm gonna find you, little piggies! And he starts screaming. I can hear him thrashing around by my bed and the closet, and he starts screaming, I'm gonna find you. And then he continued to the next room and the next, and even the bathroom was like, aha, you're in here. But the door wasn't even locked. And then when he opened it, then he realized there was only one room left, my parents. Then he tried to open the door, but he realized it was locked. And he smashed with his hand and then started smashing with his butcher knife. That door was not even sturdy enough to even. He could easily start kicking it in. I realized we had to do something to defend us. But I remember my dad has a gun in the nightstand table next to his side of the bed. I know that because he told me about it, but there was nothing I could do. I mean, it was not unlike my dad, which is to show up and do anything. But without a desperation, I opened a drawer, and sure enough, my dad had a gun there, and it was even loaded. But he showed me how to load it if something would have been happening, just in case. And like to this day, until this day, I had never even wanted to have to be using this. But I told Marco, I have this weapon, my dad, in a whisper, so that the clown would even hear it. So I grabbed the gun, loaded it at least with the full round, and I pointed it at the gun. The clown screamed out, "Don't you dare! I have a gun!" And the clown was silent for only a few seconds and said, "Ha! As you really have a gun!" And he starts smashing the door even further. He started kicking and kicking. And I warned him one last time, don't you dare! If you even dare, I will freaking shoot you! But the guy would not even care. He didn't even listen. He just continued and continued. So I unsaved the gun and said, this is my last warning. Don't you dare! And as the door was about to crack open, I fired at least 4 rounds right through the door, and we heard this big sound, the thud outside. And I'm assuming the bullets hit the clown and fell to the floor. But I was so scared to even do anything. I was sitting there holding the gun in my arm, in my hands, pointing at the door just in case if this clown would do something else. But in fact, it was silent. And the girl was crying and crying. We sat there in the room for I don't even know how long. But suddenly it felt like almost like in a minute later, but it was actually a couple of hours later when I heard those sounds below. It was actually my parents. But I was still terrified to do anything because we hadn't even heard anything from the clown. But as my mom was just walking upstairs just to see if I was asleep, she screamed and she called my dad to get upstairs right now because there was a dead clown on the floor. And I was then when I heard it. A dead clown. The clown was dead. And apparently I must have fired all the shots in him and instantly killing him. My parents knocked and saw the door was had been bashed with this knife and it was almost like being one kicked away from being opening. So my dad just knocked on the door and asked, Daniel, are you in there? I was scared. I couldn't say anything, but Marco said, yeah, you're in here. The girls were still on the bed crying. Then, my dad said, Marco, open the door. It's just us. Even though Marco was hesitating, but he did. And sure enough, as he did open the door, he did see the clown was dead on the floor. My parents had called for police, and the police did show up, and they actually started asking me and my friends what just in the world just happened during that night, and why this man was lying on the floor dead, and why he was holding a gun, and who guns were. My dad told them that it was his gun, and he had a license, but he had no idea why that happened. So me and my friends gave the police officers our statements, telling them that this freaking clown was following us on the way back home to my house during a trick or treat. And this guy suddenly started chasing us. Freaking said that he was gonna kill us, and even though he even had smashed inside the house, which the police and my parents could confirm he did. And the police called for the ambulance and they took this clown away from the house. But they say that they will be calling us for an update in a couple of days to see if it's who this can have been and what purpose. And only like 2 days after Halloween was over, my dad and my mom got a call from police and they told them that this guy was in fact a really bad person. But they didn't tell me exactly until like when I was way older, when I was like 18 after finally finished high school. They told me, but this guy was actually on high on meth and more than usual, and he didn't even care if it was done something also. But it turns out this guy was even an actual killer because he had been in and out of jail for at least a couple of times before an assault, almost murder, meant attempted murder, and this was really this bad case. But they were glad at least he was gone off the streets and that no one else will be hurt by this guy. My parents told me I was a hero to have been protecting my friends, even if it meant been doing that. And I did tell my friends about it after some time after that, and they were agree on that. So even though we were not going to see this guy, well, be glad for that. And this Halloween stuck with me and my friends forever.